Welcome to the Sporticos Football Stories podcast. My name is Resnik-Hanson, and today I'm joined by Cole Pettem, editor of the acclaimed Aston Villa fan site 7500 to Holt and host of the Holtecast. I'm very excited to learn all about how Cole became an Aston Villa fan, the highs and lows of recent years at Villa Park, and his takes on the current situation at the club as it evolves seemingly minute to minute as we're recording today. All that and more on the Sporticos Football Stories podcast. Hey Cole, how are you doing today?
Very good. Yourself, Craig?
I'm very well, thanks. Thank you so much for coming on the show. On the show, we like to talk to fans of different clubs and kind of get into what it means to be a fan of that particular club. So, could you tell us a little bit about how you became an Aston Villa fan? I mean, I'm not hearing a thick Brummie accent there, so it sounds to me like you have a story to tell. What is your story? How did this all begin?
So I don't have anything close to a Brummie accent. I'm actually Canadian. I'm in a small town about 4 hours outside of Toronto. I'm assuming most people probably know where Toronto, Canada is, so that's where I'll reference that. But anyways, I guess my story of following the Villa kind of started roughly around the 2011 season, 2012, somewhere in there, to be honest. So a late bloomer nonetheless. I guess it's one of those things over here where you kind of look at it and I'd say international support definitely improved the more television improved in terms of coverage of the Premier League and just football in general. So kind of started there. I was really looking for just a team to support, played a lot of FIFA, thought, you know what, let's find something. Wanted to buy an American or Canadian slang jersey or shirt, if you're being in the UK slang, I guess you could say. And yeah, I just saw Villa had a massive sale in their clearance items, and that's the first kit I got. And from there, I've just been hooked, really. It's been a lot of downs at the start. Now it finally feels like we're on an up, maybe another emotional down here in the next 24 to 48 hours. But yeah, it's kind of started from there. And yeah, from there, it's been just getting involved with fan media, websites, way back doing YouTube stuff, which was probably way more cringier looking at it now. But nonetheless, just being part of the community, really.
And how did that sort of connection with the club evolve over time? Because you mentioned in the beginning it was to do with just kind of, a lot of UK British people are interested in the NFL, for example, and they find a team, and sometimes it's the colour of the jersey or the uniform, or sometimes it's maybe an affiliation with the city or one player, something like that. And in your case, it was, I guess, something similar. You ended up buying the Villa kit, and that's how it got started. But now you're the host of a podcast about Villa. I mean, clearly you're way more invested now than you were then. How has that kind of changed over time? And was there a turning point where you got quite seriously interested in Villa as opposed to those really early days?
I would say probably at the start, it just was pretty casual for the first season, probably I would say. It was kind of, the change was really once I went away to university, which is probably 5.5 hours from where I am now. Really, I think I was the only one at that time from my hometown that went there. I was getting kind of more invested in the football side of things. I always played it up until really, as of late, until really COVID, but I just kind of wanted to get more into the fandom side of it. And I guess really at school, it sounds a little depressing, but I guess as a 18-year-old moving away for the first time, it was just kind of acclimating to something completely different. And there was no one really there that I connected to and with in terms of football that really understood it the way that maybe I kind of think I do, at least. Not to sound conceited, but I just like to have serious chats about it, and all some people want to talk about is Messi and Ronaldo, so that doesn't really kind of pique my interest for more than 5 minutes. So yeah, I just kind of started online, went from there, and yeah, started off with making YouTube videos about match reviews and interviewing different people and starting kind of a Google Plus Hangout series with a bunch of other guys from different clubs to interview other fans. And if you know what Google Plus is, that's really kind of make me feel old now because I don't even think it exists anymore. But
I remember the name. Yeah,
yeah,
don't think I ever used it.
yeah. So yeah, just kind of started from that. And once school was all done with within 4 years, it was really time to become an adult. So that kind of came to a halt. I kind of put it down. Of course, they got relegated in my final season at university, so it kind of weirdly felt like everything was coming to an end in terms of covering it and maybe diving so much personally into it. And then obviously the coverage in the championship over here is like non-existent. Thank God they brought it a pass for watching things on poor streams, but that was still a lot of money. So yeah, it just kind of all kicked off really again for me. Probably roughly around the whole threatening of going out of business, as in Villa, with the whole selling Grealish. Everyone's up for sale under Steve Bruce. Steve Bruce leaves. We're in a mess. New ownership comes in, and yeah, it just kind of re-sparked that passion in me, really. And from there, the promotion season, I actually got, I guess, long story short, involved with 7,500 to Holt. Did a little bit with them in the past, way back, and thought, you know what, it's time to get back into it. It's just nice to have that kind of conversation with people, with fans, and to really interact with them. I think with a lot of people, it's easy, especially if you're in the UK, just to go down to the pub and have a chat. But for a lot of people that, especially now within COVID, it applies anywhere. Just to be able to connect with people, and even if you're putting something out that you feel like it has to be semi-serious, just having that chat, it's probably one of the best feelings you could ever have.
You mentioned that nowadays football's so global that it's not surprising to encounter a Liverpool fan from the US or Africa or Asia or anything like that, or Real Madrid fans and stuff. But with Villa, it's a little bit different. Obviously, I'm sure there is a global fan base, but maybe not quite as big. Have you encountered any other Canadians, or pretty much have you encountered any non-Brummies that are Villa fans?
Um, from person to person contact, no. I've never met one. I know there are a bunch in Toronto. Apparently, there's a smaller fan supporters club in Ottawa, which is like an hour away from me. And I should probably actually go to the Toronto meetup whenever they do have it. Usually, I think they have like a big one every year for whole North America. And they pick a spot and everyone goes. I know there was supposed to be one right before COVID and then it got knocked off, but yeah, that's probably something I need to check off because one of my co-hosts actually, he is actually English. Somehow he's over here in Toronto. I should probably actually meet him because I'm feeling really guilty now that we're only 4 hours away, and that's the excuse. But no, I've never had any physical contact yet.
Yeah, you should definitely get down to one of those meetups. That sounds really cool, and especially with your co-host, you got to do that. But I guess moving back then to 7,500 to Holt, and or even before that when you were just getting into the team and getting the jerseys and everything, who were the players around that time that kind of piqued your interest, and how do they compare to the type of players you have now? Where would they fit in to Dean Smith's team? Would they?
Well, I mean, I think the easiest one for everybody's probably Gabby Bonlahor. It's kind of it's your Villa through and through, really. Um, as much as I'm not going to bring up Jack Grealish right now, because that's kind of what we were hoping he would be. But anyways, but yeah, it kind of starts with him. You'd have to say the days of him and Andy Vyman and Benteke. As much as we would go on in those days and say how poor, frustrating they were at times, seemed to be pretty good. Now, in terms of how any of those would fit in now, if we had Pride Benteke now, I would take that, but not the Benteke now. I don't think too many would, to be honest. Um, Gabby in his prime, heck yes. Andy Vyman, probably not. I think his really only thing to claim to fame with Villa really is that whole picture of him standing in front of the Holt with his arms spread out, scoring that winner against Man City way back. I still had that as my screensaver for like, I don't know, 5+ years, and I'll always remember that. But yeah, those were really the ones that kind of got me into it. Looking at the history of the club, kind of semi into when I was just kind of looking around. Ashley Young, which is brilliant to see him back now. It's kind of like reliving something that I never thought would happen. But yeah, I would say those four more than anyone.
Okay, and you mentioned possibly going to Ottawa or Toronto to meet up with some fellow fans. The pinnacle of that would be going to Villa Park. Is that something that you have thought about? And I can imagine it must be really expensive and difficult to do, but is it something that you sort of hold out hope for in the future?
Yeah, massively. Actually, my last year of school, I was trying to figure out how, if I didn't spend so much money, if I could like take some of my student loan and make it into a trip there. That didn't happen because it just wasn't financially feasible. But yeah, no, it's definitely something on my list. Just have to kind of add more um, pennies or dimes or nickels over here, whatever you can want to refer to our currency as, to my piggy bank. But yeah, that's an aim one day.
Now, it might be difficult for you over there, I guess, being a little bit separated from it, but from what you can tell with all the conversations you're having on your pod and in general in the community, how big an impact was the pandemic in terms of restricting the fans from the stadium? Just how much did that seem to hurt the fans, from what you can tell?
Massively. Just speaking to some of my co-hosts and regular people on the pod, some of them have been season ticket holders for ages. Thinking of actually Simon in particular, one of our co-hosts, he's been going since I think the early 90s or mid 90s. He's the oldest one there, so we always make fun of him for that, but nonetheless, I can only really imagine in that aspect, but it's definitely been something that's been very awkward. I mean, the survival within the last few games of the first season back, last season with so much unexpected success, and for no one to be there until the last game. I mean, fair enough, it's capped off in style with beating Chelsea, but with only a very small portion in there, it's been kind of weird. And especially, I can only imagine for these players. You look at, well, literally anyone we've signed last season, they haven't experienced what it is to really be a Villa player until that stadium, or Villa Park, as you want to call it. I guess some people don't like when you say stadium; they think it's very American. But anyways, um, it, it's hard not to experience that without really understanding what it is to be a Villa player. So I'm sure they're looking forward to it. But from a fan standpoint, I know with the pandemic, it's been crazy, and I feel like this is just something of a mess that's not even close to being over, unfortunately. But I'm just looking forward to seeing that stadium at Villa Park, that a place that I love, filled out again.
And how hype are your co-hosts and your friends about going back?
Oh, extremely. I know a couple of them are season ticket holders that are co-hosts on the pod, so they're very, very excited for that. And I don't even think it's just for those that are going back within the stadium. I think it's just the regular routines within life, like whether it is going to Villa Park, whether it is an away day, whether it's just going to the pub to watch it with friends or to sit around home and watch it with friends. I think it's just getting that kind of social interactivity back is going to be the main thing for everyone. So on that end, I hope it goes really well, and I hope it stays that way because I'm sure sick of COVID.
Yeah, me too. I hope so. Like you said, in every aspect, but especially getting fans back in stadium, it's going to be great for everyone. Now let's get to the football side of things. So you mentioned the relegation and how that made things difficult logistically for you to even watch the games, which is an aspect that I didn't even think of. Um, Prior to that, the club was an ever present in the Premier League, so they were around the whole time. What was it like for you as a fairly new fan, I guess, because I think you said you came along in sort of 11, 12. What was that like? Just how bad was that relegation? Was that something that you ever envisaged happening? Because a lot of Villa fans had seen, I don't think in the Premier League era they'd ever been relegated. So for a lot of neutral fans like myself, it was kind of impossible thing to imagine, really. Kind of like Newcastle or Everton. Well, I know Everton never have been relegated, but when Newcastle were relegated, it was just, I can't believe this is actually happening. It's like if Liverpool got relegated. When Villa got relegated, it was pretty crazy. And to finish bottom of the league. What was that like for you, sort of 5 years into your journey? How did you react to it?
Well, it's kind of interesting, I guess, because I came in right when Martin O'Neill left. So, like, that's really all I knew. Like, the success of getting into the top four and going for it all, really, at that point was kind of foreign to me. I just came in at the very end, so I thought, okay, like I guess it is what it is. And really, my Villa fandom started under Paul Lambert, really, or Alex McLeish. So it's really like it's really poor in terms of management. But I mean, those years and kind of looking from uh, kind of a fan who would try to cover the club from my aspect, it just kind of felt like it was always coming. It was every year was okay, let's see what we can do. And it was just scraping by every year. It was 30 odd, 35, 36, whatever, maybe 40 points, whatever it might be. It was scraping by. And then as soon as Benteke left, it was kind of okay, we have all this money, we're going to reinvest. Jack Grealish was just coming through, so there's a second mention with him. So that was exciting. He was the one that seems like, okay, we have someone in our academy finally that's going to come through, invested a lot of money. Um, and I just remember that whole season. It was one of the biggest messes I've ever seen. The thing that kind of annoys me now, it's when you look at it, it was the right players at the wrong time for the most part. You look at Jordan Veretout, you look at Idrissa Gueye, they're very good midfielders now, but they were just too young. There wasn't enough cohesion to bring all these different internationalities, all these different players back into this club at that time. And I think there was a lot of change mess from all the changeovers that we've had where it just never really seemed like anything was settled. Gabby was on the back nine. I know there was a lot of issues with his personality clashes and stuff like that going out. Um, some people really were arguing if he wasn't too bothered unless he was playing blues or something like that at that point in his career. So it it sucked, but I feel like looking at it now, it needed to happen. And I feel like a lot of clubs kind of fall into that now where it's spend, spend, spend. You have to stay in the Premier League. And as weird as it sounds, as financially troubling as it can be, I mean, look at where Sunderland are. Look at what's happened to Pompey. The list goes on, really. Sometimes it just needs to happen to be a true reality call of not even for ownership or players, but for the fans as well. I feel like when you're in the Premier League, no matter what's happening, you think, I wouldn't say you think you're better than everybody, but there's just kind of this blindness to everything kind of around you. And once you're out of it, you just realize how hard it actually is to get back to that spot. So, yeah.
Yeah, complacency too. You always imagine that it's never going to change, especially a club of that stature. But just to clarify what you were saying about when you came in, as a fan and at the end of the O'Neill era where it was kind of consistent sixth place finishes in European football, it was 16th, 15th, 15th, and 17th before the rock bottom season. And like you said, we're talking 38 points, 41, 38, 38. So even surviving those seasons was miraculous because, that usually it's the classic 40 points, isn't it, to be truly safe. And on 3 of those years, Villa didn't even get that. So it's a miracle they stayed up anyway. We're looking at Benteke knocking in 23 goals a season, 15. This was the reason, I guess, that you did stay up, and after that, it all changed. You mentioned that it was, I guess the squad was a bit haphazard with some young players who maybe were there at the wrong time, maybe some older players, and the whole, it just didn't really fit. But is there, we don't want to point fingers, but is there a particular factor that really sums up what went wrong that season? What was because to finish 20th with 17 points for a club of that stature, looking back in maybe in 20 years' time, what will be the reason that we say that happened?
Ownership. Randy Lerner wanted out. It was well known at that point too. He did a lot. He invested a lot. It didn't pay off, and I think at that point, I don't know if he lost interest. No one really knows. I mean, if anyone ever does an interview with him, it'd probably be the most listened to thing within Villa fandom. But I think it really has to fall from that. I mean, Tim Sherwood came in at the end of the previous season, got us to the FA Cup final, and then we just got absolutely smashed by Arsenal. Would have wasted 90 minutes. That was to watch. But it's just a factor of things. There was no really stability. It was looking at, okay, let's bring in Adama Traore. Let's bring in a couple guys from France. Let's bring in this guy here. Let's bring in Rudy Gestede because he's going to somehow bang in a bunch of goals from having all right championship campaigns. It was trying to, I guess, put square pegs in round holes, really. It never really fit. And I mean, I think at some point in that season, you're just sitting there thinking, okay, they're going to get themselves out of this. We've done this every year. At
Yeah.
least I'm thinking this because it's happened. And then I think we drew against Leicester, and that was their surprise title-winning season, I think, if I'm thinking correctly, the year we went down. And I remember we drew against them in like mid-January, February, and I thought this is going to be the turning point. Like these guys are good, and we just did that. So like we got one. I'm thinking we just got 1 point. Like I don't know what I was thinking, but anyways, but yeah, it was just absolutely gut wrenching to go through that. But then again, as a fan, I feel like it's almost made me a better fan too. You kind of have to realize what you have, and no one's really bigger than the club too. So I feel like that reinforced that the more than anything.
Yeah, and like you said, sometimes it can be a good reset for everyone, for the club, for the fans. It can either go, you know, drastically wrong like it has at Portsmouth and Sunderland and several other clubs, or it can be, like you said, a good refresh and you kind of come back stronger. So moving away from all of that kind of all those woes to more positive news then. How big an impact has Dean Smith had since coming in? Do you well, I guess the question is, who do you praise more, him or the new owners, in terms of turning things around?
I think it has to start with the ownership. I mean, we were a sinking ship to say the least. Steve Bruce left, didn't really know what was going on. New ownership came in, and it was just almost an overnight thing in terms of, okay, we're going to relieve the club of debt. We're going to get things turned around here. And of course, Wes Edens has experience with that with the Bucks, of course, now that they've won the NBA championship. And so he has experience with turning, I guess, a smaller market team around. And obviously, this is a massive market, so it's maybe something a little bit different, a little bit foreign, but nonetheless, it has to start there. When Dean Smith came in, really, it was okay. He's a Villa fan, so that's great, but he didn't really have the greatest of starts. I think we lost or drew a few on the bounce. And then I think Grealish was still injured. Tammy Abraham was linked with a loan move to Wolves for the rest of the season, so his loan move to us would have been canceled. And the story goes, at least from what I've heard, Jack convinced him to stay, saying, "I'm coming back from injury soon." And as soon as he came back, it was that 10-game unbeaten run. We're in the playoffs, and it just seems like nothing could go wrong at that point. Yeah, honestly, I think it has to go down to both, but it all starts at the top, really. So I'd have to say ownership.
The following season, it wasn't exactly one of those get promoted and then go straight to eighth or something, but it was still great. Stayed up by 1 point in the first season back, if I'm correct. So the club made great progress in that regard, staying in the Premier League, and now things are starting to look even more comfortable after last year, because despite having some key injuries, it was a great season for the club, I would think, especially given the recent history, right? Or pretty much all the time you've been a fan, this is maybe the peak. Who would you say were the real standouts last season? Was it to do with any players that were brought in that you thought did particularly well, or any players who adjusted really well to moving up to the Premier League? What would you put down the success of last year? Who would you put it down to?
I guess that missed call against Sheffield United, really, with the goal line technology, is probably the main hero, to be honest. But and I know a lot of Sheffield United fans are still probably very annoyed about that, or Watford or Bournemouth. The list goes on and on. But see, that season was very tricky. Lost so many players. A lot of the players we let go were probably 33, 34 and over. A lot of overhaul. We had a different sporting director at that point, to be honest, too. So it was a lot of bring in players from abroad, see how they do. But if I'm going to nail it down to a few players, of course, you're going to say Jack Grealish. That's the easy one. Douglas Luiz was key after Project Restart started. It was like a brand new player. I can't forget Trezeguet. The man basically carried us against Arsenal and scored 2 against Palace, and we needed those wins so badly. Those 3 in particular, you'd probably have to say. Tyrone Mings has always been a rock. I know we conceded so many goals that season, but in my opinion, he's still massively underrated. And I think the one that probably goes unnoticed in that season more than anything for me is probably Resnik-Hanson when he came in. Very, very young at that point. I mean, he still is. A 15 million pound move from Brentford. A lot of people thought, okay, potential, but you may not see that for a few years. But again, as soon as Project Restart happened, he got put in the team and he was just absolutely unbelievable and has been since. So I'd probably have to give it up to those four or five I said. I can't remember exactly how many I've said, to be honest.
Plenty. And what went right between the two seasons, I guess, post Project Restart? So you stayed up, which in itself was a great achievement, but to then make pretty big strides towards, I think, finishing 11th last year, right? Finishing 11th, that's a great even bigger achievement. Was it to do with the players that were brought in the summer? Was it to do with developing the players that were already there? I guess, how did the team manage to achieve what it did, and did they defy your expectations? Were you expecting another close relegation battle, or did you expect actually to push on and finish mid-table?
Well, it was kind of weird with, I mean, it's probably weird for every fan of every football club. It was basically, okay, we're gonna play the rest of the season throughout the summer and then have a few weeks break, and it's gonna be right back into the next one. So there really wasn't that break, and I think that helped us more than anything. Like, to be honest, I thought it was gonna be, okay, we're 1 point from being relegated, so maybe we can push up 2, 3 spots. Um, just kind of how it felt around that. And I think a lot of people are just thinking, okay, I can relax for a few weeks and then this starts all over again. And but no, I almost think that really helped us because it allowed a lot of players, and I think COVID saved us, to be honest. I can remember right before the 4-0, I think it lost to Leicester. There was just a bunch of defeats in a row there where it just looked soulless and it looked like we were just a sinking ship and it was only a matter of time. But I think that extra time really helped us. I think it made some players like Douglas Luiz, Nakamba, et cetera, just kind of gave them a lot more time to really embed themselves in, get more comfortable around each other, and that really showed. And then you look at Emi Martinez, which is probably the best signing we've had in the last 10 years, and I will always say that because Arsenal are fools for letting him go, to be honest.
Yeah, crazy decision on
You
that
look
part.
at massively. You look at Matty Cash coming in as well. It was just kind of filling areas where we needed to address, and it was so much different from the season before, where we basically bought a whole new squad almost, and had to fill so many different areas. It was just about improving quality while also kind of grabbing potential for players that can exceed value and expectation. And if you know what, in the future they have to go, well, you just probably tripled your money there. So um, I think really it kind of boils all down to that kind of stuff.
So we've had steady progress from getting promoted under Dean Smith, staying up by 1 point, potentially down to COVID, and then moving on to finishing 11th. Now, as the new season starts, what would you say are your expectations or hopes for the season based on what you've seen transpire over the last few weeks and based on last season, and of course, based on the elephant in the room, which is the news which is unfolding right now, which at the moment is not official, regarding Jack Grealish's potential move to Manchester City?
Um, I it's I mean it's been such a emotional whirlwind with Jack Grealish, and it's been like this for since we're in the championship, since our promotion season. Really, it's been, will he stay or will he go? In a weird way, it's kind of nice for it to be over. I'm gonna say that, and I assume it's gonna be done unless he has some massive U-turn and something goes wrong. Which, to be honest, at this point, it wouldn't even surprise me. I'm so emotionally drained from the whole situation. I'm just like, who knows? I'm gonna wait for the official confirmation. But I think there was a lot of expectation that, and kind of thoughts within the fan base, that we'll have another season with him and then he'll go. Coming out 11 months ago, signing a new 5-year deal and saying he believes in this project, I think that's probably the thing that hurts the most. Is it just kind of goes down again where players just kind of say what almost you want to hear. It kind of feels like, I understand the move from his standpoint and everything, but I don't really think it affects us more than maybe some people think. I think a lot of people forget how long he was injured last season. And his injury record, really, for the last 4 or 5 seasons, it's been he's out for like 60% of the season. Or sorry, he misses about 40%. So we have for 60, I should say, or roughly around there. So we've still had success without him. I think the tail end of when he got injured and how we managed that was probably the thing I'm most impressed with. And it's not similar to the whole Benteke thing, but it's another key player leaving. But at this time, I feel like, you know what, we have enough quality within the squad to at least finish mid-table. I mean, the transfer window's not done yet, so who knows? People know now that we have money, even though we already did before, which really confuses me, why people still get that confused. But I would probably say we're probably aiming for top 8. I would say that's definitely progress. Um, I think with Jack, it probably pushes us to top 6. To see Leon Bailey, Grealish, Buendia, and Ollie Watkins probably would have been the best thing of my life, to be honest, within Villa fandom. But that's very unfortunate. But nonetheless, I think the thing kind of boils down to is our ownership. I've never had this much belief in Villa ownership. And there's a clear plan there to buy players and to reinvest in youth players. And arguably, we probably have one of the better youth systems now within a year and a half or so. So, you know what? The future's looking bright, but I'm still going to go with a top 8 finish.
As a fan, do you blame Grealish for the move?
I would have this morning. I would have on last Friday. I think at this point, people kind of people look at it from their perspective of he's a Villa fan. A lot of people have said, do you want to live as a legend forever here, have a statue made after you, yada, yada, yada. But you kind of have to look at it from his standpoint. He's 25, which if you look at it, it's probably a miracle we've kept him for this long. Um, and we've gotten insane dollar value out of him, or pound value, whatever currency you want to refer to get £100 million from a player that only played about 60% of last season, who had a good Euros, but still, I still think there's an injury there with the shin. Something's still not right to me. He just still didn't look the same. Who I don't hope he gets injured, but I feel like it's going to come up again. Um, it's it's crazy value. It's now up to ownership really to take that money and invest it wisely. So if he wants to go win easy trophies, then that's his goal in life. Hopefully, he's probably hoping he plays another 10 plus years. So if he stays at City for 5 of them, he probably hopes he wins something every year. I don't know. There's an argument really to be made about winning, say, like 3 Premier League titles, a bunch of League Cups, FA Cups. If they ever win the Champions League, who knows? If they get Harry Kane, that's probably definitely going to happen. And I don't know how much I want to even watch a City game after they have those 2, because that'll be disgusting. But I don't know. It's one of those things where how much more would it have meant to him to win something with us versus them? But no, at the end of the day, I understand it, and I have to wish him all the best. I mean, he could have left in the championship. He could have left when we got promoted, and he could have left last season. So the fact that he's even showed up to training, I think he still trained today, apparently, at time of recording, and everything's just being kind of the waiting game now. So it is what it is. I mean, no player is bigger than a club, and I think that's another thing that's been really, really mixed up is, I'm sorry to rant on about this, but I think a lot of people look at Jack Grealish, and a lot of the media doesn't really pay attention to Villa, and they didn't really traditionally, especially when I first started following and kind of through. And now it's almost been this way through Sky or whatever media outlet that Jack Grealish is bigger than life, and that's fine and dandy, but he's not bigger than Aston Villa Football Club. So at the end of the day, we move on. He does what he wants. We do what we can, and life goes on, really.
Yeah, it's a very strange cult of personality with Grealish, isn't it? I don't know if it's the calves or the hair or a combination of both, but it was the same thing with England, you know. With the meat, he's bigger than the nation, let alone bigger than Villa. But I guess to go back to what you were talking about there, I think I agree with you. I don't think he disrespected the club in the same way that maybe you could argue Kane is doing.
Hmm.
He still trained. He trained every day. Like you said, he stayed during the championship year, which is quite commendable, I guess, by nowadays standards of football players. I mean, every football player has their beloved boyhood club. A lot of them come through the youth academies of the clubs that they love, but that doesn't stop them leaving immediately when they have the chance. And he had the chance to go to Spurs. He stuck around. So I think he's done, by today's standards, he's kind of honourable in that case. And it's difficult, I guess, for us to speculate about, what he's thinking or what could happen in the future. But an ideal scenario would be, he goes over there for 3 years or something, 4 years, wins a bunch of trophies, and then comes back. I mean, is that out of the realm of possibility? And maybe he keeps an eye on Villa over the next few years, see how they do, and who knows, maybe if they're finishing fifth 2 years in a row and he's 28, would you welcome him back with open arms if he says, okay, look, I won my trophies, but I love the club. I'm still Villa through and through. I want to come back. I want to drive Villa on into the top four. What would you think about that? Would you accept him?
Um, it's a tricky one. There's always that saying that you should never kind of go back and that kind of stuff. It's not as good as it was before. I mean, we'll have to wait and see what happens with Ashley Young, a completely different player now. So I guess maybe that's not the greatest example, but I don't know. I I guess so, but at the same time, I feel like some of his, I wouldn't say his reputation, but the persona around him, especially around Villa, I don't think it's going to be what he maybe thinks it would be if he did come back, especially down the line. I think at that point, everyone's moved on. It'll still be in people's minds. No one will ever forget. But I mean, I guess it depends on the dollar value too, with that kind of perspective too. But yeah, all I can say is it's going to be very interesting when he's in a Manchester City shirt rocking up at Villa Park. I think that's going to tell a lot, and maybe not even this season, but the season after that, because I think the first one will probably be the most emotional. I think the second time he comes back would probably be the biggest tell-all, and I think
Do you
I
think
can't
he'll
remember
get? Do you think he'll get applauded?
I think it'll be very split. You'll have people that are very kind of mindful of what he's done and appreciative. You're going to have people that just don't care and are going to be angry, and then you're just going to have that small percentage that are absolute idiots and try to ruin the game for everybody because they think they're smart or whatever. But it is that way with every club, unfortunately. But yeah, it'll be interesting. I think actually our last game, I can't remember if it's home or away against them. I think we have them on our last day. So I'm not really looking forward to that if they're winning the title, because I don't think I can watch him lift a trophy right now. Or at least right now, I'm still a little scared. So
Yeah, it's such a difficult emotional thing for a football fan, isn't it? It's such a unique situation. It's almost like a love affair, you know. You don't want to see him happy with someone else, but in a way, maybe you do, because like he's done so much good stuff, and he is a Villa fan, and kind of maybe if you're not going to win the league, he should win the league, right? But
yeah,
it's so tough because, like you said, it's like watching your ex-partner with the next person, so it's tough. But to go back to Villa specifically, post Grealish, let's assume that he does leave. At the time of recording, Twitter is all ablaze with reports of planes landing and people tracking flights. I didn't even know you needed to do that from Birmingham to Manchester. It's like 2 hours away. I'm making that journey myself on Friday, and I'm going on a bus, which takes 2 hours, so the plane must be 20 minutes. But anyway, he's landing. It looks like it's happening. Let's assume it happens. Let's move forward without him. You talked about Leon Bailey coming in, Buendia, some really, really good signings. Bailey's an unbelievable player, in my opinion. How excited are you to see those new players and to see this new look Villa team, even without Grealish? I think there's a lot of positivity there.
oh, massively. The biggest thing since really promotion has been we need another outlet outside of Jack, and that was Buendia coming in, and then you're thinking, okay, so both our flanks are very well kind of acquitted. Target and Grealish linking up, and then you're thinking Cash and Buendia linking up, overlapping. That's going to be something good. Obviously, he's now gone. You would have to assume Leon Bailey's just another one. I think it's value for money in terms of what he can be. I think there's still a little bit of question. I was listening to a few other podcasts earlier this week, and a lot of people were saying, well, this is why he's going to Villa for 30 million and not Chelsea for, say, 50 million. And it's still kind of that um, undecisiveness, I guess, about where he kind of sits in terms of his ability and will he be able to kind of reach his potential. So I'm more than happy for that to be Villa, even if it's for 2 to 3 years. I don't know if you saw the whole shenanigans last night with his stepdad and the announcement stream on YouTube where he
No, what
introduced
happened?
yeah, it was very strange. He had like 20 of his relatives there, and his dad introduced like all of them or something, or I don't know if it was some academy that his stepdad run. It was the most sketchy, random thing, anyways. That was the first stream, and then the second stream was Leon Bailey signing a contract, but they still didn't really say where he was going. Um, yeah, it just I don't know that whole kind of scenario kind of spooked me a little bit. I'm thinking I hope your stepdad as your agent isn't kind of driving too much of an issue down the line in the future, because I know he was saying, oh, that'll be a great step for 2 to 3 years, and I'm thinking, oh, great. This is great. Controlled
There's a
by a
lot of that
stepfather.
nowadays, isn't there? There's
Oh, it's
kind of
mental.
fathers and stepfathers, and I guess in a way you'd think, oh, it's a good thing because you'd rather have them looking after your career because they really care about you than some random agent. But then with some of the things they come out, they shouldn't really be plotting your career publicly and telling people, we think this will be a good thing for a couple of years. That's crazy. A professional probably wouldn't say those kind of things, right?
Yeah, well, I think the best example was, I don't know if you ever heard this too, but I just remember, I think I was listening to another podcast. Maybe it says I listen to too many podcasts, but I think there was some kind of kerfuffle in the Euros between, I think it's Rabiot's mom is his agent.
Yep, yeah, I heard about
Yeah,
this, yeah.
And she was having to go at Mbappe's dad or something weird like that
On Twitter or
about
something.
about how your son's not like a team player or whatever it was, and it was just like over here in Canada, of course, hockey's king. That's always going to be something. So like the whole kind of mindset here is hockey parents are mental, and like I played minor hockey and youth hockey all my life, and yeah, you'll have parents yelling at you, swearing at you. Like you could be 8 years old and they'll be like giving you the finger. Like not everybody, but like you'll have that odd one or two in every group, and it's just that's what it reminds me of. It's just it's I understand it because maybe you're thinking they have your ambitions and everything kind of in the back of their mind or whatever, kind of in terms of your best intentions. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how that one turns out. But I hope it's not that situation with the France squad because oh boy, I've already
Yeah.
dealt with the Grealish stuff. I can't deal with this now.
You don't need that drama. We have the same thing here in England. I'm sure all the British listeners can attest to that with the youth football, with some of the crazy parents coming along and sometimes fighting each other and stuff like that. But that's kids' sport, right? To go back to your hockey analogy. But at the top of at the elite level football, I think we need less parents and less family members, or at least because there are a few of them that aren't like that, that just they manage their son's career or whatever, and then they just do their thing. But we don't need these Twitter spats and crazy press conferences that you mentioned. Because that's a shame, because it kind of soured this arrival of Leon Bailey, I guess, because I really rate him as a player, and I thought he could have been a great signing, but you don't really want his introduction to be some weird thing with...
Yeah, well, it looked like it was in like a rec room or a shed too. It like I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm very excited, but like it was just probably the weirdest thing. Like given the time difference and everything, I'm sat there last night making like a homemade pizza and then watching this live stream of like Bailey's cousins or whatever they were get introduced and what their skills on the pitch are. I'm thinking like, what has my life come to following this football club? So, add that the Grealish thing. You can add the Ward Prowse thing being linked with Cantwell, whoever. It's just this last week has been absolutely mental. I just can't wait for the window to be done, to be honest, because this has been like transfer silly season to the
I
max.
feel you. So before we get out of here, I just want to put to you a couple questions that I've got over on WhatsApp, and then I want to do a quick fire with you. I've just got a question here from a friend. His name's Stephen Forrester, and he asks, how highly do you rate John McGinn? So we spoke about how we got these new arrivals coming in. We got Grealish leaving. Where does McGinn fit in next year? And do you see him progressing and being even more important than he already is?
He's an interesting one. Very good in the championship. A very good all-around player. It just I feel like we still need to play him a little bit higher than we do. He sits too deep for my liking sometimes in Dean Smith's system. He's gonna have to be even more key now. He's one of those key personalities alongside, say, Mings, you need to really rely on now with Jack being gone and kind of part of that whole long-term projection of we've been here for a few years, we know where we're going, we know where we've been kind of thing. So I think he plays a massive part. Would like to see him off the pitch a little bit more, but again, it's about him staying healthy too. He took a very, very long time to kind of get back to the old John McGinn after his injury in the year after promotion, or I guess well, the year that we came back, I should say. So we'll have to wait and see how that works out, and I guess what other midfielders we bring in. But no, I'm hoping he has a promising season.
Speaking of a couple of other players that, again, I think in this case it's even more unsure how they're going to fit in. So another friend of mine, Rob, asks, what do you think about the future of Trezeguet, who you previously mentioned, and El Ghazi? So we have Buendia coming in, we have Bailey coming in, Grealish is leaving. So there's still a lot of exciting options in that sort of front kind of four area. How do you see the two of those playing a part in that, Trezeguet and El Ghazi separately? What are their futures next season, in your opinion?
So, well, Trez is going to be probably around for the season. He's injured, so I think that's until the middle of the year, the season, I should say, really. So he'll probably stay around for the rest of the season, but my best guess is probably next season he'll move on. El Ghazi is an interesting one, very inconsistent at times. Last season was kind of his breakout season with us. Seen a lot of rumors about Roma wanting him for 15 million. I don't know how he'd want to really play for Mourinho, really, but and see how that personality would really clash, or if he would do well. So that would be interesting. But nonetheless, I think he sticks around as another squad option. I think we're just kind of adding higher quality to reach that next level. Keeping him and Traore, I would say, as the kind of key backups, with Traore kind of able to play in the middle and it kind of has up top in the past too. I think it just kind of really adds more flexibility and kind of gives us different options if we have to change things up. And really, even with last season and how well we did, with most people thinking at least we did, we didn't really have that kind of depth where we could change things up. So I think it's really just kind of adding another tool to our arsenal at this point.
I guess building on that, how do you see him playing? Do you see him playing a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3? And assuming that Watkins is obviously going to play, I would think. Who do you think is going to be the first choice? Because like you said, we've got Traore, Buendia, Bailey, El Ghazi, Trezeguet. Will he play three in behind Watkins, or will he play just two wingers with him? And who will those be in terms of first names on the sheet?
I would say it's kind of an interesting one. I would say the formation kind of goes from a 4-2-3-1 into a 4-3-3 when attacking, I would say. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's a lot of similarities with the formations anyways, but you would probably have to assume from kind of the mid three and then the attackers, you'd probably have to say Buendia on the right. The middle's probably the interesting one because Buendia can play there as well. Traore can also play there as well too. So whether that's Jacob Ramsey or whoever's going to step up to the plate there, that's probably the biggest question mark right now in terms of who's going to fit there. Bailey's going to play out left. And then you would obviously say Ollie Watkins up top. But yeah, like I said a few moments ago, I think the kind of central attacking mid position, if that's the way we're going to run things going forward, is probably the kind of curiosity that may kill the cat at the end of the day, really, because you would think, okay, that's where Grealish is going to go. And we're just kind of lacking that one player that could maybe link and unlock others' defenses maybe in the middle. So I'm assuming that's going to be the one, but yeah, that mid part's probably going to be the biggest question mark going into the season.
Another player who's been brought in, who of course Villa fans love, Ashley Young. Is he going straight into the team? or is he going to be providing competition?
I'd say providing competition. He's literally went from a left mid into a left back, right back. So,
Yeah.
which is really smart in my opinion. He knows his age and how well he can kind of compete for that position. So he's kind of tooled his game to fit where he can kind of, I guess, have the best performances. And I mean, he clearly still has it with playing for Inter last year. I mean, you wouldn't be playing for an Antonio Conte side unless you were still good, in my opinion. So, of course, that league is a little bit slower. So we'll have to see how he kind of competes in that. But no, he's going to be competing. I would say he's perfect cover for Matty Target. But you know what? I think he's also perfect to play left mid too if it really comes to it. So again, it's kind of just that flexibility and that squad depth that gives us so much opportunity that, well, heck, if somehow the right back goes to absolute kaput or another injury happens to Matty Cash, then maybe he can fill in there too. So really, I think for an all in all kind of with this season, it's just looking forward to it. Very excited.
Yeah, well, he's a proven winner. He's got great experience. He's flexible, like you said. So, I mean, probably he'll probably play about 15 league games a season. Maybe he'll be coming off the bench sometimes, and maybe he'll play more if there is a catastrophe, like you said. And I'm sure he'll play all the cup games. But as a fan, it must be great to see him back. Just to finish off, I wanted to go through a few little quick fire questions with you. So the idea is to say the first thing that comes to your head, but of course, don't worry if it takes a hot second. And if you want to take a second to explain why, of course, that's absolutely fine too. But let's get it started. Favorite Aston Villa player of all time?
Ooh, um, I'm gonna have to say Gabby. I think that's kind of self-explanatory.
Favorite Aston Villa manager of all time?
Dean Smith, I guess. The competition really isn't very high with Paul Lambert and a number of other failures. Steve Bruce. Steve Bruce doesn't even know how to run training sessions apparently, so he can't even be in the contention either. So yeah, Dean Smith.
Yeah, wasn't it? Was it Callum Wilson the other day who was saying that? Yeah, Steve Bruce is like a nice
Oh
guy, and that's
yes,
his role. He
yeah.
doesn't
There
actually know how tactics work. He's
there
a
was
current
a
player for him. He plays for him right now.
well, that's the most damning thing. There was I think it was Grealish that came out or something and once said that training was basically Steve Bruce walking onto the training pitch and saying, well, dropping the ball and going, okay, scrimmage. Like,
Oh
oh,
my
okay.
god.
Like, I wish I could do that for a living. But anyways, somehow he's still in the game. So
So Big Dino is the favourite because there's not a lot of
yes.
competition in your kind of fledgling career as a Villa fan. I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Favourite current Aston Villa player?
Oh, I guess it's kind of
Difficult,
changing.
really difficult.
It's changing by the day at this point. Um, hmm. You know what? I'd probably say Emmy Martinez right now. Just one heck of a debut season. Um, I've never
Great
really been.
Copa America too.
Yeah, and I mean, with goalkeepers too, it's kind of maybe you don't need the most amazing goalkeeper even in a really good side, but he's just saved us so many points, and I think he's only really getting started. He seems like a little bit of a late bloomer, so long may that continue in a Villa shirt.
We spoke about how Ashley Young is coming back as a former player. Any other former players that you'd love to see back one day, either in that capacity or returning to the club in another way as a coach or a manager? Just any former player that you have a real affinity with that it would be a really romantic homecoming.
Um, I'll give you two answers here. One because Mila Jedinak's already with the side; he's our loan officer, but I would love to see him as like an assistant coach or something. You just know you're not getting any BS from that man. That beard, that stare. You do not
Yeah.
want to mess with him. So that's my more light humor one. But I guess one maybe that's a little bit more realistic would be Olaf Melberg. I know obviously he does his coaching and management, all that kind of stuff now. So it would be great to see a very very good Villa player, a Villa legend to most, come back and
Yeah, a
kind of
true
serve us.
legend, I would
Yes,
say,
100%.
for sure. True legend and a natural leader. So yeah, it would be great to have him back in some capacity, I'm sure. One player that could fit in really well at Villa if you signed him. So this is one that I always like to ask people when you're watching games that don't involve Villa, or maybe you're watching Villa play another side. Is there anyone who pops up and you think, he would be great in our system? Not that he's linked or anything, maybe it would never happen, but for some reason or another, you just see that player and think, I'd really like to see him play for us.
These are really good questions. Where does where does my list start, really? I guess if we're looking for probably what Villa need most is like a center attacking midfielder, I'd say. Um, until maybe a youth prospect or someone kind of jumps at it. Um, I mean, I would kind of love James Maddison. I'm not gonna lie. If he stays healthy, and I feel like with his friendship with Grealish and everything, it would just kind of be kind of ironic. Maybe he could take over that some of that fandom a little bit. But probably not the best answer. But I'll go James Maddison.
No, I think it makes sense. I think he could slot in perfectly well in the system. And before we go, the final one of these, the correct score of the opening game, which I believe is away at Watford.
Yes.
Another Ashley Young former club, actually, I think. So
Yeah. And
that would be a weird coincidence. Maybe he can play against another one of his old teams. What will be the score?
It's going to be an interesting one. You have Ben Foster probably putting his GoPro in the camera for YouTube content. You'll have Troy Deeney, who always loves bugging Villa fans and scoring against us somehow, even at his twilight of his career. So, you know what? I'm going to go 3-1. Why not? 3-1 to Villa. Be positive.
Thanks so much for coming on, Cole. We really, really appreciate it. Before we go, is there anywhere that people can follow you on social media?
Yeah, for sure. If you want to listen to a Canadian talk about Villa and football in general, you can find me on Twitter at @TalkAstonVilla. Otherwise, you can just tweet the team at 7500 to Holt, or find the Holtecast anywhere on Google. Just search Holtecast. You'll hear Canadians, Britons, whatever. We all talk Villa rubbish, so we're all there.
Okay, Cole, thank you so much again for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you. And I hope that you will have good news when the season starts next weekend.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Thanks so much for listening to the Sporticos Football Stories podcast. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if that's where you're listening. It really genuinely helps a small podcast like ours a lot. Also, if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend who may also like it. We appreciate this more than you could imagine. Head to sporticos.com for news, data, statistics, live streams, everything you need from the world of football. You can also follow us on Twitter at sporticos.com, and you can follow myself at Craig Sporticos. We love to read out the thoughts and questions of our listeners, so please feel free to tweet those over to me anytime or send us an email to show@sporticos.com with your opinions or your questions, and we'll get to them on the next episode. Either myself or a guest will address them. Thanks again so much for listening, and thank you so much to Cole for being a part of the episode, and we'll see you next time on the Sporticos Football Stories podcast.